it's okay if you haven't listened to the podcast, but I talk about, wellness and feminism. And I just try to bring on people with interesting backgrounds and topics just to balance the whole aspect of, staying woke and staying well. And I brought you on because I wanted to talk about your business as well as sex education in general, because I think that, right now people are learning differently, especially as adults, a different way to relate to our bodies and intimacy. And yeah, so just tell me about what you do.
Yeah, so I am the CEO of a company called Sexpert Consultants
Mhm.
LLC, and we are a sex education company focused on bridging the gap in sexual health education among adults, right? Um, our the workshops that we teach are primarily pleasure positive, meaning like we focus on orgasms and how to give pleasure and how to receive pleasure and how, our bodies function. Because I think when we learn sex ed, we learn like how not to get pregnant and how not to contract STIs or STDs, and maybe how to use a condom, or at least here is a condom, look at it and figure it out on your own, right? And so what we do is, we focus pleasure, like we center pleasure in our workshop. So it's like not performance, not, we do tricks and tips, but it's not like, you know, I guess our whole tagline is prioritize your pleasure, right? And I think we are not taught as humans, but especially as women, to prioritize our pleasure. And so that's what we do. Oh, and we also train people to do this work too, right? So we train people to do the workshops that we teach so that, I could be like, oh no, I'm the only one who can teach these workshops that I made. Or I can be like, I can like replicate me in your city and my city and across the globe. So that's what we're trying to do.
Okay, so tell me about the impetus. Like, how did you, what was the story behind Sexpert Consultants?
Yeah. Okay. So I've always been that friend that people go to for advice, not because I was like, trained on sex or anything as a kid, but because I was just, I educated myself and I was a little more adventurous
Okay.
than others, right? And so in college, I monetized that passion through a multi-level marketing company that was selling sex toys, right? Like Tupperware parties, we were doing sex toy parties. And that was great. But I realized that before I could sell a toy, I had to educate my audience, right? I had to tell people what a clitoris was and how penises worked and the types of orgasms people can have. And that was really like my passion. I was like, this is the fun part. So I started teaching my Blow His Mind Fellatio workshop back in 2015,
Wow.
about 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was kind of as a joke. Like I was selling sex toys on the side and I was like, oh, well, let's see if people would take a blowjob class in DC. And it's sold out. Like
Yeah. They'll take it.
it sold out. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was a nonprofit development professional. I was writing grants for a living and working with the
Wow.
White House on like education initiatives. I never thought this would be like my full time. And so anyway, the administration changed and I got laid off of my nonprofit job.
Mhm.
And I had a decision to make. It was like, okay, I could go back into nonprofits, which are, you do the good work, but as long as the work is being funded by whatever administration is, at the time. So my husband was like, look, you can go back to writing grants, which will be there forever, or you can
Mhm.
try your hand at this business. Like you really have something here. And so I was like, all right, well, here goes nothing. And that was 3 years ago. So 5 years later, altogether, we're at Sexpert Consultants. And so I decided first to start offering more classes because people were like, well, where's the cunnilingus workshop? And do you have an anal workshop? And what about couples workshops? And
Oh,
so,
wow.
right.
Mhm.
So I got my certification through Indiana University's Center for sexual health promotion.
Mm.
Their School of Public Health offers a 14-hour training. And so I started there. And I got my certificate for sexual health promotion. And I was like, all right, let's do this. And I started partnering with gynecologists, pelvic floor therapists.
Mhm.
Um, there was a woman that I was working with named Jennifer Beeman. She was teaching this um, really cool way to like map your sexual experiences, but with like little blocks. So
Hmm.
instead of using words, it was really cool. And I was like, okay, these are all workshops that people need to have. And so we started developing more workshops and people just started coming to them. And it was, obviously my background is marketing. So I was like, all right, I can, once I build it, I can get people to come.
Yeah.
I got to build it. And so I realized that I had a replicable model here because I had other people who were in the multi-level marketing company with me. I left before
Mhm.
I, ventured out on my own. But I had other people who were like, I really want to learn how to teach that blowjob workshop because you were making a lot of sales. And I was like, okay, well, let's do a training.
Mhm.
And from there, that was 2 years ago, we branched out and started doing trainings for our 4 signature workshops, which are the Blow His Mind Fellatio workshop. We have our How to Eat Cake Cunnilingus workshop.
I like that.
Mhm. A women's sensual self-care
Mhm.
workshop, and then we have couples pleasure mapping. And so those are the 4 that we offer certifications in. So a certification just means you are certified to teach our curriculum to your community.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's really great. So, my next question is because now I'm assuming you're teaching to adults, correct?
Only adults.
Only
Adults
adults.
only. Yes.
So, what do you think is missing from modern day sex education?
A pleasure focus,
What
right?
does
Nobody.
pleasure focus mean? I'm sorry, go on.
Right. So, okay, so pleasure focus for young kids is like, do I enjoy the way I feel when others touch me certain ways,
Mhm.
right? Like hugs and kisses and allowing them to have autonomy over those things,
Mhm.
right? For older kids, like middle school children, pleasure looks like, okay, we're not talking about having sex, but like, know what your pleasure feels like what does your self-care pleasure look like? Is it self massage, or is it, taking a nice shower, or is it like, what does that look like for you as a middle schooler, right?
Yeah.
In high school, you build on those things, but you also start to talk about if you're going to tell children not to have sex, but they're feeling these sexual feelings, then you have to talk to them about sex and you also have to talk to them about masturbation
Mhm.
and give them the tools that they need to have privacy to make their own decisions. And, you know, I think that's really what's missing because I get a lot of adults who are ashamed about sex or ashamed of their bodies or
Mhm.
think they know everything and then know nothing, or know nothing and are expected to know everything. Because, like, if you think about heterosexual males in this society, right?
Yeah.
They're taught not to talk about sex, don't talk about sex, you can't have sex. But when you're an adult, you can have sex and you have to know how to make a person orgasm immediately. And it's like, and the person who has the clitoris oftentimes doesn't know how to make themselves orgasm either. So it's
Yeah.
like, I have to do a lot of teaching and unlearning. And so that's what's missing, a focus on pleasure.
So why do you think that because I think the statistic was 1 in 10 women have not experienced an orgasm. Correct me if I'm wrong. Why do you think that is? Yeah, I cuz I don't know how that can happen. But yeah, just break that down.
I think that, so it's really hard to like
Mhm.
quantify
Mhm.
why a person might not be having an orgasm.
Yeah.
But I know that for a lot of people, like the first thing is, hey, did you know that the majority of your clitoris is on the inside of your body?
Yeah.
So, and that little nub that you see on the outside, for many people, you have to rub it to reach orgasm, right?
Mhm.
For over 70% of people with clitorises, you have to rub the outer part of their clitoris for them to reach orgasm, which means penetration is not gonna cut it alone. So if you are
Mhm.
just solely penetrating yourself or being penetrated and not reaching orgasm, it's because you're not doing it right. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like, at first you have to like understand, is it a user error, right? Or then is it like something else, right? Because look, clitoral dysfunction is not even like a diagnosed thing, right? We have erectile dysfunction and there's medication everywhere, but how do you know if your clitoris isn't working, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So vibrators help. Right?
Yeah.
I think if you've tried a vibrator
Mhm.
both internally and externally and you haven't reached an orgasm, then that's when it's time to see a professional,
Got
right? And
you.
figure out what's going on.
Okay. So, um, we are in 2020, correct?
Mhm. Are
A
we
lot
still
of, huh? Yeah,
are
we're
we
still here. We're still here. So a lot of us are at home and seeking pleasure ourselves with ourselves. And also when it comes to dating and, before the pandemic happened, more people were switching to online dating just because our lives, for some reason, well, there's many reasons, are more busier now. And it just seems like an easier option. So do you think that the online dating has contributed or harmed the sex positive movement or the pleasure positive movement? And I asked
Hmm.
that question
I
just
think online.
because, sorry, go on. I was going to say I asked that question just because a lot of what you see is okay, you get on these sites and people are just looking for one thing, whether it's Grinder or Tinder or anything like that. And it doesn't leave space for anyone to feel like, okay, am I really enjoying this or am I just getting this quick fix of, satisfaction and not necessarily enjoying it? Yeah.
You're so right. I do think that technology is helping us connect in faster and more vast ways than we ever could have thought. Like I can connect
Mhm.
with someone in another country a lot more quickly than I would have been able to, 10, 20 years ago.
Mhm.
So that's a good thing. But I do think that it's creating a culture, this hookup culture, right? And hookup
Mhm.
culture is devoid of intimacy,
Mhm.
right? And the craziest part is hookup culture comes, in my mind, out of a need for intimacy. And for many people, especially millennials, right? And younger, we feel like the only time we get intimacy is during sex,
Mhm.
right? And so it's like this quick fix intimacy, but we're not being intimate with each other.
Mhm.
Right? And so it just becomes really super transactional. And there's a lot of just passion and intimacy that is not, it's not there. Um, yeah. And so I think what's cool is those folks who can like find that hybrid balance, right? You can meet someone
Mhm.
online, but to get to know them, right? And then to, because it's hard to have intimacy with someone you don't know
Yeah.
at all, right? It's how can you be intimate? There is no deep knowing, right? But once you get to know someone, you can create intimacy. So I'm saying that it's possible, but is that the goal for most folks? No.
Mm.
And
So, what does intimacy truly mean, and what does it look like?
so intimacy, ooh, that's a good question.
Mhm.
So intimacy is not just what we feel during sex and with sexual partners, right? Intimacy is what we feel when we share special moments with our friends and
Mhm.
family. It's when we connect with a person and can be vulnerable, right? And feel accepted, right? So the opposite of intimacy in my mind is embarrassment,
Mm.
right? That vulnerability without acceptance. And it's like, oh, I feel embarrassed. But intimacy is vulnerability with acceptance. And that feels so good,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Whether it's romantic or platonic or familial or what. So I think we're lacking a lot of intimacy in our lives on all of those fronts, and we are trying to replace it with sex. And and intimacy can be gained beyond your romantic relationships. So, just food for thought.
Yeah, so you say we're replacing intimacy with sex. So do you think that, do you think that leads to why a lot of people are single? I'm single right now and I'm on this group. Not sure if you heard of it, but it's called Black Single and degreed, and it is it's on Facebook. It's about 2,000 Black folks with degrees, and we are all just like, and they're trying to find each other, and it just seems to me like even the language or the discussion that comes onto that group, it's not necessarily about, you know, finding a partner or what it means to connect with someone. It's really about it's just not intimacy focused. So do you think that I don't know, have we just not been taught to, you know how to build intimacy?
Oh
You know?
yeah. Oh yeah. Especially for heterosexual folks. Like
Mhm.
like and male-bodied people. Like they are socialized to not be intimate, right? To not display emotion, to not like these are all things that are viewed as weak. And so when we value a lack of compassion, of
Mhm.
course, intimacy is going to fall through the cracks, right?
Mhm.
I also think, especially when we start talking about people of color, it's
Yes.
really hard to find safe spaces to be vulnerable. We don't know how to create a safe space and we don't know how to operate within a safe space, right? And I'm not saying none of us do, but I'm saying it's challenging, right? If you've
Yeah.
never been in that space. And so and creating a safe space is like, you know, my husband had to tell me about this. Let's get into this real quick, okay?
Okay.
My biggest problem was that my husband was having a hard time like opening up and being vulnerable with me. And
Mhm.
I value intimacy in my relationships. And he was like, you know, it's really hard to be intimate and vulnerable with you when you're mad at me and you throw it back in my face. And I was like, I don't do that. He was
Yeah.
like, the last time I told you, you know, I didn't like it when you talked to me a certain way. When you got mad, what would you say? Well, this is why I talk to you like that, right? You brought it
Mhm.
right back into my face. And so that made him feel like he didn't have a safe space. And I could see that, right? And so you have to recognize that when you're creating vulnerable spaces and intimate spaces, right? Those spaces exist outside of whatever anger or whatever you feel, because that's the first thing that we want to go to when we're hurt. We want to hurt someone. So it's like, oh, let me go to your most vulnerable place. So that's when we build up those walls, right? It's like, I'm never letting anybody into this space ever again because I've been hurt,
Mhm.
guarding up my walls. And then the intimacy can't get in. So like I said before, it's a delicate balance. It's a
Yeah.
delicate dance. I think many of us could use a little therapy because therapy helps
Amen.
create intimacy in a like professional setting. So it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I have a place where I can be safe so that you don't have to rely on your partners to be that only safe space for you, you know?
One thing I've noticed, and this is just a side note, that I've actually become more comfortable being vulnerable and open with my therapist than I am in my relationships. Have you ever encountered that?
Oh yeah. I mean, of course. Look, I'm
Mhm.
not gonna vent to my husband about what
Right.
I vent to my therapist about, but that's the point, right?
Mhm.
Because there's
Mhm.
a space. I am paying this person to hold space for me, to hold a safe space for me so that I don't have to, you know, I can have more of intimate relationship because I've gotten it out, right?
Mhm.
And I think, oh, Esther Perel has a really good book called Mating in Captivity.
Oh.
And
Hmm.
she talks a lot about how the biggest like problem in relationships is that we
Mhm.
rely on our partners to be our lover, our best friend, our therapist, our brother, our sister, you know what I mean? Our
Mhm.
confidant, our financial
Everything.
advisor, our everything. And that's a
Mhm.
lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And it makes you not look at your partner in a very sexy way if you are relying and they're relying on you for all of those things. You're not going to look at your partner the same when they act like your mom or your dad.
Mhm.
Like that's I'm not,
Mhm.
you know? So the more you can outsource, right? Those
Some of those
needs.
roles, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Like you have friends, they should be helping provide intimacy for you. So you don't have to beg your partner for intimacy every single night.
That's
You know what
true.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. That has been really helpful just personally for me to just really recognize the ways in which I receive my intimacy and give my intimacy. And am I being codependent? Right? Is this a codependent, intimate relationship? Or is it
That's how what's her name? Jada Pinkett Smith got in trouble. She was looking for a
mm,
codependent relationship.
entanglements? Yeah.
Entanglements.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay, so this is not even on our list, but speaking of entanglements, do you think that being more pleasure positives focused in your intimate relationships, do you think that that will contribute to someone not seeking out entanglements or falling into entanglements in their relationships?
I think it I I can't say
Mhm,
no, right? Because I think that it when you have multiple places like where you get your intimacy,
mhm,
I do think the need for intimacy from multiple people all the time decreases because you're fulfilled,
mhm.
right? But there are people in this world, shout out to the poly community,
Yeah, shout out. Y'all
right?
strong.
Who who can, openly and freely love
Mhm,
and get intimacy from multiple places, but it is not easy. Like, that's not an easy thing. And it takes a lot of talking and a lot of intimacy and a lot of vulnerability and a lot of planning and a lot of like learning how to communicate your hurt feelings, which is something that people don't do well either.
mhm,
So, I don't know. I can't say that it would make you less likely to like step out on your partner, but
mhm,
I do think it would make you reevaluate,
mhm.
right? Because look, the truth is most people step out on their partners because they are seeking some type of intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Physical intimacy, emotional intimacy.
Mhm,
And if you are getting those things from other places, then you are less likely to need it in abundance from one
mhm.
people. So,
Got it.
yeah.
So we talked about creating spaces as far as an intimate space. Now, there's a thing called sensual self-care. What does that look like? And I'm pretty sure that you're expanding that past just masturbation. But what is sensual self-care?
Oh, I love that you said that. I love that you say we're expanding this past just masturbation because that's what people think. They're like, oh,
Mhm,
sexual self care, that's just touching myself. I do that. But it's not, it's beyond that. So, sensual self care is, I'm all about pleasure, right?
mhm,
So, sensuality is enjoyed through the senses, right? It's
mhm.
expressed and enjoyed through the senses. So, so when we think about self-care, we think about like yoga, bath time, facial spa, like that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But we really don't like when you think about sensual self-care or sexual self-care, the thing you think about is, oh, masturbation.
Mhm,
But really, sensual self-care in my mind is learning how to seduce yourself through your senses.
mhm,
So, what sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and touches turn you on, make you feel relaxed, make you feel pleasure,
mhm,
right? How do you seduce yourself? Because it's one thing to masturbate. Cool. Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. But it's
mhm,
another thing to really seduce yourself and make a habit of it, right? That's just introducing pleasure into your life. I'm reading this book right now called Pleasure Activism by
mhm,
Adrienne Marie Brown. Please, if you are a Black woman,
mhm.
please read this book. Like, just, I wish I could just buy a copy for everybody and just send it to every Black woman I know because pleasure activism is all about pleasure as a form of resistance,
Mhm,
right? People try so hard to steal our joy. And
mhm,
what an act of empowerment and power it is for you to make room for your pleasure. Every day, I try to do something for 30 minutes that brings me pleasure. Every day.
wow.
Because if I don't, I won't ever. Because nobody is prioritizing my pleasure. No one.
Mhm, mhm.
Especially if I'm not. Okay. You got to lead by example. So I'm sorry. I didn't mean to preach today. I just,
No, preach. Say what you gotta say. I like that you said that because when I first, because I'm in the UK, but when I first came over here, what I kind of God and what I start to feel, this was like in June, the world, not the world, but the country was like, on fire. I started to feel guilty about leaving the country. I
Mm.
was like, how, in my mind, I'm like, how can I leave? My people are fighting. I need to stay here and be about them. But every like month I've had to remind myself, those who came before me, they did not take the time for themselves, like they didn't go and do something that will make them happy. So when you say sensual self-care, I even think about my decision to come over here as a part of that, because I guess I guess you could say it's something that I needed to do. And even when people ask me, "Oh, have you not paid attention? Do you not know what's going on? Do you not know what's going on?" I'm like, I'm taking my audacity and my right to take care of
Yeah,
myself.
yeah. And you deserve that. Look, you and your ancestors have been dealing with this country for years, decades.
Ooh.
Okay. So how dare you?
Mhm.
How dare you, Black woman? How
Mhm.
dare you prioritize your pleasure and your rest? Right. Resist.
Exactly.
Honey, resist and bask in the privilege of being able to resist in this way, right? And bask in the privilege of knowing that yes, people died for your right to be over there. Do you know what
Mhm.
I mean? Like, so let's not put that guilt on ourselves. You don't
Okay.
you don't need that guilt, okay?
Okay.
You and your ancestors have worked hard enough,
Very
okay?
hard.
And you're gaining experiences that many women like you don't even have access to.
Mhm.
So this is not just for you. This is for us all. It's
Okay.
okay. Okay. Do not, don't do that to yourself. Don't do that.
Thank you.
Because imagine having passed up on this opportunity.
Mhm. I would have regretted. And I've passed up so many times for relationships, for people, and I
And
was depleting myself. Hmm?
yeah. And the thing is, like, I don't know. I just I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but I'm gonna just
Go,
real quick,
go.
okay? People act like these are new problems that we
Mhm.
are facing. Like, it's like, how could you leave in the middle of all of this? In the middle of the last 300 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Like, what am I supposed to wait another 300 years? Like,
Mhm.
no, absolutely not. America is just opening its eyes again, like discovering it is not innocent and saying, oh, we have to do something. And that ain't your problem. Okay.
This is true. I didn't make these problems.
No,
And yeah, I just didn't make these problems.
you didn't.
So I want to get back to sensual self-care. Sorry. So sensual self-care. So what are some, just give me, but without giving me your entire class, what are some things people can do to practice sensual self-care?
Yeah, okay, this is good. And I can give you like I'll give you like three. Okay, so we
Okay.
think about the senses, right? It's really easy. When I say this, people are like, "Oh, but this is so super simple." It
Mhm.
is. Okay, so think about your senses. The top three are sight,
Mhm.
smell, and touch, right?
Mhm.
So think about what sights turn you on. What kind of porn are you watching?
Hmm.
Are you into um erotic art, right?
Mhm.
Is it just the undressing that gets you, right? Like what sites is it that arouse you? And how can you expose yourself to those sites in a safe and legal way?
And
Right?
legal. Say
Yeah.
more.
Then let's move on. So let's think about it, right? Like for
Mhm.
me, when I want to be in a sensual mood, I like to watch there's this scene from Jason's Lyric. I'm so old. I'm so old. Don't come
It's
at me.
okay.
There's this sex scene from Jason's Lyric that I just be like, yes, like it's not a porno. There's no penises or anything coming out, but I look at it and I'm like, oh yes. And like it gets me all tingly. And that's something that if I just want to stir things up for myself, I'll go ahead and watch that. Then
Hmm.
I will do the next thing, which is smell, right? So scents are something that help with memory recall.
Mm.
And so I've known my husband for 17 years. And when I met him, I was wearing Love Spell from Victoria's
Oh
Secret.
my God. That's
And
a
so
throwback.
it is. But so
Yeah,
when I put we have a candle, you know, they make them in candles now.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so when I lit my Love Spell, I light my Love Spell candle after I put my Jason's Lyric on. I light my Love Spell candle, and now I'm in the mood. Like I'm back in the day. I'm like, you know, hot to try, ready to go.
Mhm,
I
mhm.
get in the shower, right? But before I get in the shower, because that's where touch comes in. But before I get in the shower, I'll take some massage oil and I'll just rub
Mhm.
myself down, like, and just really deliberately, like, long strokes, slow strokes, just to get my skin nice and soft and to feel like that feels good. That makes me feel, it also stirs things, right? Because it's like,
Mhm.
I'm touching myself. I am the like best lover that I could ever have. So I'm touching myself. And then I get into the shower and that's where it all goes down, right? Then this is my
Mhm.
self-seduction. And we're only talking about 3 senses right now, right?
Mhm.
Imagine if I incorporated the other 5, that would be a hour to 2 hour long pleasure experience, right?
Mhm.
So that's what you can do, right? What is your pleasure ritual? Start building it now, right? Start with your
Mhm.
site and then incorporate some sounds, put on some Sade. Again, I am old, okay?
You're fine.
um, then you want to, bring in your tastes, right? Like, what are you gonna? I love a little chocolate, right? While
Mhm.
I'm watching my little Jason's Lyric, I'm eating my little Ghirardelli chocolates. Oh yeah,
Aphrodisiac, I got you.
right. But I'm seducing myself in ways beyond just my genitals, and so that's my sensual self care like challenge to folks. Outside of touching yourself, what do you do to seduce yourself?
Mm.
And
That's
turn that into your ritual.
that's a
Seduce
very
yourself once a week.
once a week. Wow, that's good. Some people don't think about themselves once a month. Wow, that's really great.
Mm.
So, when you're doing your sensual self care, you've basically allowed yourself and you've given yourself consent to do that. It's a shame that we even have to think about like giving ourselves permission to take care of ourselves. You know what I mean? And love on us. It's wild, but I think that with time it'll change through practice. Do you think that the language around consent, especially when it comes to partners, has changed? In the group I told you about, I hear like a lot of, heterosexual men saying they don't know, how do they, make consent sexy? How does someone do that?
Consent always has and always will be sexy.
I agree.
If a person walks up to you, especially a person who you've been, romantically dating or
Mhm.
talking to or having romantic conversations with, if they come up to you and they say, "Hey, I would like to do X, Y, and Z,"
Mhm.
and you're like, "Yeah, I'm down. Yeah." Guess what? That's consent. Like this is how you ask for consent. It's not dorky like, "Can I please touch you here?" Like, please, come on. Your game got to be better than that, bruh. And if it's not, that ain't on me.
So true.
What? I mean, that I thought that's why game was invented, to get consent. Like, what is happening
True.
here?
That's
No, like people are like, the game is invented to get the draws. Exactly. And so the whole point is consent, right?
Mhm.
Right? So how are you? What's your game? Show me your game.
Yeah. I hear you. It's kinda like, okay, we're adults here. Why don't you know how to do that in a way that it doesn't feel like, you're signing a permission slip?
Yeah, like why are you not good at not being a creep is the real question.
Exactly.
How have you been getting consent before?
That's the real question. Have you been getting consent at all before?
Yikes. But I think this is
Mhm.
like a startling revelation. Again, like we're not teaching consent in schools. Little boys don't
Mhm.
know any better. And I'm not like condoning these things, but I'm saying like I have to tell my 12-year-old son sometimes like, hey, your sister said don't touch her, don't touch her. What are you
Mm.
doing? Right. And not in a bad way, but like, they're just playing around and she'll be like, no, don't touch me. And like, even if she didn't mean it, don't touch her. Okay. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, but we don't teach them that. We don't teach our little girls either. Hey, if you say don't touch me and someone keeps touching you, you have the right to fight back. You know what I mean? Or you have the right to tell an adult, right? Like we don't tell them how to say no, and we don't teach people how to say no, and we don't teach people how to like earn a yes. And so of course we have this conundrum on our hands now, and everybody's so afraid. Men are so afraid that like they're gonna say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And it's like, now you're like unwrapping your privilege. Good job.
Mm.
You learn like, oh, like this is physically intimidating, and I probably should talk to her about like how she feels. Oh, I didn't know. Yes, you did it. And now
Yeah.
you do better.
They're so afraid of getting hashtag me too. Like they're so afraid of that. And when I hear that, I just tell them like, look, you haven't been taught what it is to give consent. You don't, our society is patriarchal, so it doesn't teach that. It teaches hunting
Hmm.
without any type of consent. So that's why we're in this situation. You have to ask. It's not that hard to ask. But you brought up a lack of we keep talking about the lack of education and sex in schools, and um I didn't get sex education until I was like in the 6th grade. But even before then, I was like reading Cosmo myself, learning everything.
Me too.
Which
Me
is, it taught me a lot, taught me some tricks. But one thing that I've always said is that there's also a lack of sex education from a non-hetero viewpoint. What's the steps, and how would someone even like incorporate that in their child to teach them, okay, this is sex education if you are a member of the LGBT community?
Yeah, so I think that the real issue is like just not teaching about sexual diversity in general, right?
Mhm.
So like if you're concerned that like, okay, I'm teaching my child sex ed and they may be a queer person, and
Mhm.
I don't know how to teach queer sex ed.
Mhm.
The sex ed that I teach is not different between queer people and heterosexual people. It's not. I am teaching about how bodies function, right?
Mhm.
We're teaching about how orgasms work,
Mhm.
right? And we're talking about the risks of sex, right?
Mhm.
Now, I think one of the biggest harms that I see as a queer person
Mhm.
is the definition of sex for folks,
Yes. Okay.
right? Like when we talk about Ti and his daughter and like checking to see if
Girl.
if her hymen is broken, which is complete, like that's not even like sex. As a sex educator, that is not accurate, right? Some people are born without hymen. Some people are born with hymen that are larger and can, you know what I mean? Like it's just a
There's so
myth.
many
Yeah,
things.
there's so many like nuances when it comes to that, right? If she was athletic, it could have broken when there's just a lot, okay? The other thing is, if she's a lesbian, then she gonna be a virgin to her daddy all her life.
That's exactly what I thought. I was like,
Like,
oh God. Oh God.
so like you're out here wishing, like checking to make sure she hasn't had sex, but you don't even know what the definition of sex really is. Like, what is
Mhm.
sex for real
Mhm.
to your child? so,
Yeah.
so I think when we start to define sex as shared sexual pleasure between two people,
Mm. Okay.
right?
I like that.
And right, that's
Mm.
consensual sex, shared sexual exploration. Let's not even call pleasure, because sometimes it's not pleasure. Sometimes it's exploration and you're like, dang, we ain't find it. So, um, sexual exploration between two people. That's
Mhm.
sex, right? So if we're talking about sex in that way, then the risks then become the same for everyone. Like
Mhm.
the playing field kind of levels, right? So when we're talking about like putting like penetrating, right? We're talking about the barrier method. We're talking about
Mhm.
finger cots or finger condoms. We're
Mhm.
talking about um we're talking about dental dams, right? And we're talking about beyond just penis condoms, we're talking about the risks and the tools that are available to folks, right?
Mhm.
So when you don't teach sex ed that is appropriate for everyone, then people who like, if I think I'm heterosexual and I get sex ed now and I'm like, okay, I got it, and then come to find out I'm actually queer. Okay, well now what, I have to relearn everything. Like, no, that's not how
Relearn.
sex ed should be taught, right?
I
Yeah.
agree. Yeah, you kind of
So
have to relearn through the L word or, however you can get
yeah,
information.
and then you get a even more comprehensive sex ed. Like as a okay, so I'm bisexual, and as a
Oh, me
gay
too. Hey,
person,
girl. Mhm.
hey. So as a gay person, like when I came out as like homo, right?
Mhm.
Which was like the most shocking thing. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know any of these things. Like, how do you not, like, just as a woman, how was I not like privy to so much about my own body and like ways to get orgasms, right? The first time I ever had an orgasm from trepidation, I was just like,
Oh, wow. Oh, God.
sex.
Oh, my God.
Oh, sex. Like, you know what I mean? Is this sex? Like, are you on my list now?
Yeah.
Because that was definitely an orgasm. So,
Do I
like,
have a separate list or, like, is it all the same?
yeah. So,
That is so funny. Yeah, no, I tried to tell myself I had a separate list, but I don't. It's all the same.
nah, they're all the same.
Yeah.
I used to say, look, if I did an orgasm, it doesn't count,
Yeah, okay.
which meant I had sex with a lot less
Yeah,
people.
that's how I think I'm gonna do that now.
Hey, only orgasms count. That's how I feel. Okay. And who's counting anyway? Right? Like,
Yeah,
why are we counting? Why are we counting?
because of patriarchy. That's
Right.
why.
Right.
That's why. Mm. Yeah, virginity is valuable. But anyways, and that's a myth. We could talk for days.
Right, we could, because there's this tweet going around like, oh, we're not calling it virginity anymore. We're calling it sexual debut. That's what it is. That is
Mm.
what it is, because it's way less shameful, because it's gonna happen, right? So it's
Mhm.
way less shameful. You feel autonomy over, oh, when am I gonna make my debut? Instead of when am I gonna
I
lose my
like that.
virginity? When am I gonna make my debut? Oh, girl,
Mhm.
my daughter's not making her debut till she's 18, but she gonna be ready though.
Exactly. For me, I told myself, it's when I made the decision.
Mm.
That was it. That was it. But I really like my debut. I think that to me that has a little seasoning on it. I like that. I like that.
Yeah, no, it is a little pressure though. Like I think about my lesbian debut, and I was like, I should have took a little more classes before I
Yeah,
started.
I've embarrassed myself.
Me too. Embarrassed. Yes. But I teach a cunnilingus class now, so
That's good. See, you learn, you took notes,
you learn, you pass it
you
on,
mastered.
right?
You
Because if there was
mastered.
somebody who could have taught me back then, I probably would have been more ready for my debut.
That's good. That's good. Well, I don't, you've answered everything except for one. The last question I have for you is, and this is like a complete opposite swing of where we are right now.
Let's do it.
This one is about, how was someone on their journey to become more sex positive and pleasure positive, how would they embrace themselves after experiencing sexual violence or trauma?
Ooh, yeah, this is a great one.
Mm.
Um, because I think a lot of people get into this work after having experienced sexual trauma, right? And this work helps to help them help others who have been in their shoes. And so, um, the first thing I would say is it is necessary for you to begin your process of healing,
Mhm.
right? Um, with support.
Mhm.
Whether that is through group therapy or with a therapist or, with a support group, you have got to talk about your experiences and you've got to start the healing process, right? Um, the other thing is your journey to self pleasure may
Mhm.
actually help that trauma, right?
Mhm.
It may help you mentally and physically process that trauma, right? But I would not recommend doing that without support,
Mhm.
right? So making sure you have mental health supports in place,
Mhm.
and then um, starting, from the very basics, right? I have a lot, I don't want to say a lot, I have a few clients who do my private one-to-one sensual self-care workshops who are either victims of sexual abuse or some kind of sexual trauma.
Mhm.
And I think what's important to note is like when you've experienced trauma, whether it's violent trauma or even whether it's like pain during sex for the past 2 to 10 years, right? That's also trauma, and your body develops a physical response to that, right? And so if you want to have a closer relationship with pleasure for yourself, then you've got to explore your body and what brings your body relaxation and what brings your body pleasure, right? And so maybe starting with pleasure is too much for you, right? So start with relaxation, right? The same things I talked about: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. What relaxes you? What releases your brain and helps drop it down into your body, so that then we can start working on the physical and letting go of, our brain being like outside of our bodies. The brain is the biggest sexual organ in your body,
Mhm.
right? It's between your ears, not between your legs. So when your brain is focused on experiences outside of your body, then it's really hard for your body to be in tune with its pleasure. So work on your mental health, and then begin to explore your body through your senses. Start with your senses. Like, you don't have to start by touching yourself. What relaxes you? What brings you pleasure? Um, but make sure you have support. I can't say that enough. You need support.
Do you stress support because a lot of people who are victims, do they not usually seek support? Do they try to heal themselves on their lonesome?
They do. And I'm not saying that you can't heal yourself on your own, but I'm saying that like it is a lot easier to heal yourself on your own when you have support.
Mhm.
Right? You can do the work on your own. You can show up to group and just listen, right?
Mhm.
But you need the support. Yes, I do think a lot of people try to do this on their own. They try to heal from trauma on their own. They think that they are singular in the trauma that they experience. There is no one who would understand their story or their problems because no one has ever experienced this trauma like I have.
Mhm.
But when you have support, you recognize that you are not alone in this, that you have a foundation, you are not alone. And I think, yeah, I think that's the one thing that I wish more folks who are dealing with trauma knew, is that you are not alone and that there is support out here for you
And I like that you
and that you can heal.
yeah. And I think that you mentioned, you're not alone. I think that healing is a long process, and sometimes it takes some people longer or a lifetime to go through their healing. Um, and I feel that when you're doing it with people, it allows you to be more, open to having more people in your life, and, restoring that trust within yourself and within other people, because it can be a difficult place to start from.
And it helps you create platonic intimacy, right?
Mhm.
Support groups and having support gives you the intimacy, right? That you may crave and desire, right? That is not sexual. And so, yeah, I'm I totally agree.
Well, Well, thank you so much, Reba. Is there anything else that you would like to leave the listeners with, especially about your company, Sexpert Consultants?
Yeah, so thank you for having me. This was a wonderful conversation. If you want to learn more about what I do personally, you can find me online on all social platforms at Reba the Diva,
Mhm.
or at RebatheDiva.com. But if you want to learn more about the workshops and pleasure positive sex ed, then you want to go to sexpertconsultants.com.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your year, and bye to your fur grandbaby if they're still in your lap. Bye,
Bye.
Cassius. Bye. Thank you so much, Reba. Have a great evening.
You do the same.
All right, bye.
Bye.